sure most of you people know who I am. Larry Zacher, Interim Superintendent. And we're here tonight for the second public forum on our proposed 2011-2012 school district budget. It's been a very difficult process. It certainly has been stressful, and I think it will continue to be. The news is not good, and I regretfully have to report that we're going to be working with some very difficult situations and under difficult circumstances. Everyone by now understands the financial situation that we find our state in, and as I shared with many of you at an earlier meeting, the state projects us to have approximately a $1.8 million shortfall in state aid revenue over the preceding year. There are other issues with revenue as well. One of them is the sales tax issue in Onondaga County. We are only projecting a $75,000 revenue stream in this area this year, which is down from $150,000 the previous year, and $300,000 was the amount that we received in prior years. There has been some word from Albany that we may be getting a little bit more in the way of aid, but certainly the news is still not a good one. There's not a likelihood that the financial situation will improve significantly. To make matters worse, it is not a one-year situation, and I know you were told this last year, that subsequent budget years may be even worse. So it's not a simple issue of tightening your belts and spending out your reserve funds and hoping that you'll be able to continue long term. Our state aid projected revenues are $12,792,518. The reality is that if we check back over previous years, school districts very seldom get what the state predicts in the governor's proposal. Typically, the revenues received in the Jordan Elbridge School District have been from $500,000 to $1 million less than what was predicted in the governor's February statements. Because federal job stimulus money came late to the school districts had an opportunity to use it during the current school year, 2010-11, or hold that money and use it in the 2011-12 school year. Fortunately for us, we did not use that money in the current school year, and that money can be carried over and is carried over into the new school year. We're looking at other revenues of approximately $446,000 and the sales tax I've already mentioned. It has been very difficult to come up with a budget this year and trying to project how we can cover our revenue stream when there are such significant shortfalls. The proposed budget that we have at this point, we'll call it a draft 1 budget, shows a total of $27,596,582. This is 4.7% higher than the current budget of $26,357,767. If this amount of money is the amount proposed with the current revenue stream, you would be looking at a budget increase, or excuse me, a tax levy increase of approximately 7.3%. This is significantly higher than most of the other school districts in our area. Last year's levy increase was approximately 2.19%. When the district projected it last year, I believe it was projected at 3.23% or somewhere in that neighborhood. So we were fortunate in one respect that the actual tax levy increase was less than was projected. Considering the dire circumstances and looking at a 7.3% possible tax levy increase, it's hard to believe that this budget would reflect the loss of nearly 30 full-time equivalent staff members. You can't function in a school district of this size and not seriously feel such a significant impact. Last year, at this time, the district was projecting an 18.4 FTE loss. That is very significant. If we look ahead to next year, if the situation remains similar to what it is now in terms of revenue flow, it will be virtually impossible to reduce the numbers we're talking about even further. There are some significant budget increases in the budget that we've proposed at this point. There are rises in health insurance of approximately 5%. In terms of the employee retirement system and teacher retirement system, those contributions have increased significantly. For the ERS, the percentage of the money that is taken from the contributions is up to 16%. For the TRS, it's up to 11.5%. Certainly with the number of layoffs that we're looking at, unemployment costs become a significant piece. It is the district's plan at this point to use unemployment reserves to fund this amount. Up to date, currently the school district has spent approximately $80,000 in unemployment benefits. For next year, with the numbers that we're looking at and considering the potential for some retirements, we would probably be looking at least $125,000 to $135,000 in unemployment benefits. The debt service is up significantly. Our debt service, based upon the new bonds that we have out, means that we would see an increase of approximately $942,000 in debt service. That is extremely significant when you look at nearly $1 million increase in one category alone. We are looking at some potential special education increases for youngsters who we know will be assigned to our school district. They are high needs youngsters that will need tuition paid and out-of-district programs, and they will cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 apiece or more. Then, of course, all of us are looking at increasing energy costs, and we have budgeted for increased energy costs somewhere to the neighborhood of 20 to 25% increases in costs.
Just get the legal.
In the proposed budget, to offset many of these increases, we've looked at where we may provide for
Why
reduction.
did you skip the legal?
I'm sorry?
Why did you skip the legal on the last slide?
The legal fees.
The legal fees, you didn't project any of the stuff.
Legal fees, I missed that.
Yes.
Sorry about that. But we are looking to project $250,000 in legal fees. The current amount that we are providing in our current budget for legal fees is $60,000. Over the course of the last several years, and this was reported at a previous meeting, legal costs have been much higher than $60,000 and probably have been in the $100,000 range. Non-labor reductions, operations, and maintenance, we have already projected a 20% reduction in those costs. Similar to what was discussed with you last year, the new building project may relieve some of the needs regarding maintenance work, and we will utilize the capital project wherever we can. In transportation, we're looking at eliminating the midday pre-K run. We are looking to continue group stops and evaluate walking distances within the district. In BOCES services, when we got our first information back from the governor's office, there were some indications that the governor was requesting for non-instructional BOCES aid to be reduced or eliminated. So we've looked at those areas and tried to reduce those expenditures wherever possible. Other non-essential BOCES COSER services have been reduced or eliminated as well. Despite that, other BOCES increases in costs will result in an overall increase in our BOCES costs for 2011-12. And we've already indicated that there will need to be a 25% reduction in materials and supplies. I mentioned earlier that we're looking at approximately 30 staff reductions, and we currently have that to be 29.7 full-time equivalent staff members. There are 26.7 teachers and non-instructional support systems and 3 administrative positions. In terms of the administrative positions, there has been a restructuring of the central office. The Assistant Superintendent of Instruction has assumed the responsibilities of the Director of Special Education, effectively eliminating 1 position. And that cost savings would be approximately $84,000 plus benefits. We are eliminating the position of Special Projects Administrator by assigning this position as a building principal position with an approximate savings of $72,000. I have recommended the elimination of 1 associate principal position, which would result in a savings of approximately $90,000 plus benefits. There are other cuts in administration that can be factored in. Each building principal is being asked to take on more responsibility by assuming certain tasks that were previously assigned to teachers, specifically department chairs, team leaders, and advanced placement coordinator positions. This would be an approximate savings of $39,000. Until current legal issues are resolved, the district has elected not to hire an interim business official for the coming school year. The retirement of the former superintendent will save additional dollars somewhere in the $25,000 to $45,000 range. Our student enrollment has dropped slightly. If you were to drag out packets of information that you were provided in the past, you will find that our current enrollment is higher than was previously predicted. I have decided that the prediction of future years' enrollment is usually not very accurate, so I haven't provided that to you. But I would predict that enrollment will probably decline slightly, and I certainly would not expect it to be increasing. I have given you the numbers of the current students in the district by grade level, and you can see that next year's 12th grade class will be the largest class in the school. Currently, we have, I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say approximately 58 kindergarten students enrolled for the coming school year. That number changes usually quite a bit toward the summertime, and we do expect that that number will be increased. These are projected class sizes by grade level for the budget as it is currently proposed. So these numbers are with the staff members reduced. They are, in some cases, significantly higher than current staff projections would show based upon this year.
You know the baseline offhand where you can just go down real quick?
I'm sorry, sir?
You know the baseline where you're at today, so we can go down real quick and get an idea of where the class sizes are going? What's your baseline today for kindergarten?
What do you think?
18.
It's 18? Okay, for grade 1, because today is
Guidelines?
20, I think.
20. That's what I'm looking for. They know what I'm looking for. 20, grade 1. So grade 2?
21, 22.
21. Grade 3? No one knows the baselines? I mean, you got to know where you're at today versus
Where we
where
are
you're
today,
tomorrow.
I didn't bring it, I do know that, but I didn't bring them with me.
It'd be nice to see that incremental change. Give the audience an idea of
Your major
what
differences
additional
are in grade
responsibilities people are taking on.
Grade 1 is significantly different. Grade 1 is currently at 19. I know grade 5 is significantly different. Grade 3 is significantly different. And grade 6 is very much different. What have we done and what are we currently doing to preserve programs and dollars for next year? Previously, I announced that there would be a freeze on all unnecessary expenditures. We have cut back on that considerably thus far this year. Our desire is to protect money in the current year's budget for things that might be done, so we can have more dollars to apply to next year's budget for things that must be done. We have limited some field trips. We have and will continue to limit conference attendance. We have avoided filling vacant positions if it was possible. You'll recall that we did that with the resignation of a music teacher earlier this year. And we are in the process of discussing, negotiating with labor units to consider possibly lowering costs of benefits and salary increases. We do plan to continue funding the UPK program. That program is predominantly funded through a grant. The district does, however, pick up certain transportation costs, and so we feel we can save a significant amount of money by eliminating the midday busing for the Universal Pre-K program. Prior to the district providing midday transportation, there was still a significant number of students who did attend UPK. When we provided the midday transportation, I believe the number increased by approximately 8 students. We have looked long and hard at the number of classes that are offered, particularly at the high school level. But I want to assure you we're trying to do everything that we can to limit the number of reductions. I've talked about some of these things in the past. We still plan to provide for enrichment, acceleration at the 8th grade level in all 4 subject areas. The high school is working on reducing the number of electives that are offered each semester in hopes that we can reduce the number of sections without eliminating the opportunity for students to take those courses. So we're looking to continue to do that either on an every other year or every other semester basis. We've taken a long, hard look at AP courses and college credit-bearing courses. Some of these courses may be somewhat duplicative in nature, and therefore we're looking to see which ones can be eliminated without preventing students from experiencing those advanced courses. We've looked very long and very hard at the athletic offerings in the school district, and this is an area where there are significant reductions. And looking at our budget documents up to this point, our athletic department has been very well funded by the school district and by the taxpayers. The current athletic budget is over $500,000. That is significantly higher than other school districts in the surrounding area. We have looked at enacting an overall reduction of approximately 20% in materials and supplies for athletics. We have proposed the elimination of all assistant coaches. We have proposed the elimination of modified athletics and the elimination of golf, tennis, and indoor track. We've looked at other extracurricular activities as well. Certainly, those of us who got an opportunity to view the recent musical understand the importance of these activities. The students themselves did an excellent job in presenting themselves at our previous meeting about the importance of these activities. Despite that, we're looking at a potential reduction in the marching band, drumline, and winter color guard in the neighborhood of $24,000. Our Budget Development Committee wrestled with the idea of whether we should recommend the elimination of drumline and color guard, or should we allow that to be absorbed with that marching band budget. I don't think that question has been answered. My feeling would be is that that would be an answer that should be provided by the music department staff, as long as it can function within the guidelines. We have eliminated many extracurricular advisorships. One of the things that I asked of the administration was to provide us with examples of those areas where they felt either the activities could be picked up in another way, or if the event or activity were under-subscribed. So we tried to limit it to those areas where there were fewer participants. As I stated earlier, we haven't held any formal discussions with the union leadership about the possibility of a wage freeze. It has been discussed on an informal basis with the president of the Teachers Association, and letters have been sent out to the presidents of each of our unions to see if they would consider wage concessions. I have not gotten a response on that. That was only done very recently. If there were a freeze on all wages for our bargaining units, we estimate the savings would be about $309,000. That number is not in the current budget proposal. So we are not presuming that anything like that will happen, and that information, that number is just provided for your edification. We plan to continue with the bus replacement cycle. For those of you who are familiar with it, we have been on a 5-year replacement cycle, and for the coming school year, we're looking to replace 2 Suburbans and 2 small buses. And now comes some of the real scary part. This budget is also looking at the assumption of using $1.7 million in designated fund balance. If you checked into the current year's budget, you would see that the current year's budget has us using $700,000 in this category. Where are we going to get the other money from? Through a careful analysis of our existing spending plans and the freeze, we are hoping to be able to get an additional $1 million from the current year's operating costs. I mentioned earlier about the unemployment reserve. We will use that to pick up our increased costs in that area. I mentioned also about a $942,000 shortfall in the debt service. Some of that is expected as a result of the current project. As I'm sure most people are aware, the estimated cost of the field house that is nearly completed in construction is probably going to be estimated at a cost of about $1.8 million. That money is not building aidable because it does not represent instructional space. That increases our expenses significantly. Additionally, I learned that today that $405,000 in interest payments were not budgeted in the current year's budget. That means we have to find $405,000 this year to pay a liability that was not budgeted for. That interest liability for next year is approximately $715,000. It doesn't take long to do the math to understand that things are not good. We're looking at using up to $600,000 in debt service to help to offset that. That's a dangerous practice. If you burn all your reserves in a short period of time, unless you're looking for things that get bright and fuzzy later on, you have serious problems. This is not a short-term problem. It's a long-term problem. And we're probably going to be facing a similar situation in the next budget cycle. Some people have asked informally, well, what about the capital project? Can we stop the capital project, recoup money, and use that money? It really doesn't work that way. All financial considerations associated with the capital project have been completed. We're currently in the process of beginning to implement Phase 2. And the Phase 2 of your project deals with primarily the instructional areas and those portions that the public wanted to see in place that are, for the most part, fully aidable at your current building aid rate. Where do we go next? This is a repeat of an earlier slide, and it's not good news. it would be extremely difficult for us to reduce the proposed budget of $27,596,582. Really, the only place you can get large amounts of money is through staffing. You can't do it in materials and supplies, and you can't do it through inconsequential elimination of things like field trips or conferences and those sorts of things. The projected tax levy of 7.3% is not something that I would expect this community to support. You might say, well, how is it that I read in the paper that other school districts are coming in with a 0.9% increase in the tax levy, or a 1% increase in the tax levy, and in most cases under a 2% or around a 2% increase in the tax levy? So I'm talking with colleagues and reading, it appears that many of them are literally eliminating all reserves. I don't know what they would do in the future. And my question, and I don't expect an answer, but from my perspective, I don't know what level of tax levy increase the community will support. This community is highly taxed and extremely supportive in my brief time here. The residents of this community have regularly, religiously approved increases in taxes to support the young people in this community. Your tax rate is already high, much higher than most of the surrounding school districts. You don't have a lot of wealth. It's a rural community. It's not that I'm somebody who comes in from the outside and says, we can make this number anywhere we want, and that people will support it. Our goal before I came here tonight was for us to get it down to around 5%. For us to get the tax levy increase down to 5%, we would have to find approximately another $250,000. I can't see us cutting staff any further.
You could have legal fees.
And so we have to decide what we're going to do. Do we eliminate athletics completely? I mean, I have children of my own. I have grandchildren. Would I want that to happen? Absolutely not. But I really think we've got to put our collective minds together and try to decide, what do we support, how will we support it, and what will we do?
Can I ask a question, or should I wait
That's
until the
up
end?
loud for me, because I can't hear.
Can I ask a question, or should I
Certainly.
wait? Okay. You had mentioned 3 administrative positions. To me, that they've already been cut, because that's happening this year. So, I guess my question is, we have a few interim positions. Are they still going to be with us next year? So all interim administrators.
The only thought process we have, there is a person on staff, physical education instructor, who I sat down with a few months ago to discuss the possibility of doing an internship in the athletic department for next year.
Yes.
That would be an unpaid internship, and certainly, if I were here after July 1, I would support such concept. But no, we're not looking to fill any of those positions. And frankly, with the reduction in 3, we're still only saving money on 2.
Well, that's what I'm seeing.
But we're also saving money this year by not filling that position, which is where we can get some of the money we're trying to carry over into the coming year. But you've got to be really careful where you count your savings. It's like if we didn't budget $400,000 for a liability, and we now have to pull that out of the existing budget, it's almost like a double win. Because you didn't budget for it, and so now you have to spend it, but now you have to budget for that and more in the coming year.
Why was that not budgeted?
Pardon me?
Why was that not budgeted?
I don't know. I do not know. I had a lengthy conversation as recently as, I'm gonna say, 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon with our financial advisor to try to learn the nuances of that, and I don't know the answer yet.
So the estimated savings from the wage freeze is approximately $310,000.
Yes.
So if we get the wage freezes from the union, we're looking at about a 2.8% decrease on the tax levy, which takes us down to about 4.5? Is that
Yes,
about right?
yes, if.
Yeah, correct,
The
yeah.
big if is, when we budgeted revenue, we're budgeting revenue right now at what the state
Oh, understand,
projects.
understand.
And if we go back and we look,
Well, they said they're putting money back in, we'll see.
well, for example, the state said we were gonna get 14.3 million for this year. We didn't come anywhere close to that. So if you budget what you're, my Finance 101 course tells me, you figure your revenue's low and your expenses high. Well, we're not figuring our revenues low with this model. It's dangerous.
So we're talking a 4.5% tax levy if we get wage concessions from the union.
And if we agree
If
that we should
if
apply,
state aid comes in at where you're projecting here for revenues.
but we won't ever know that state aid figure until we get
Correct.
done.
Correct.
So we've got to be comfortable enough to say we're going to apply whatever we say to reduce the tax levy, or do we hold that in there as a cushion? And that's what you've got to try to decide.
Well, I don't think this community's going to.
And I guess it depends upon what you're talking about replacing. If we can say, do we want to increase the number of teachers and reduce some of those class sizes you look at? A lot of these things have to be weighed in terms of where the give and take is.
And I think that's another thing that needs to be included in this presentation, is what's the class sizes at the high school as well. Because they're not disclosed, and I think that's something that's interesting as well. And I'd like to see, when you look at a 1% tax levy in terms of salary dollars, what incrementally does that do to your class size? So the community has a good idea of what you're talking, when you're looking at $107,000, what does that impact in terms of salary dollars across the board, creates kindergarten all the way up through 12. Because clearly, when you're looking at 70% of your budget's pretty much salaries. The state budget with fringe is around 42%. I work for the state, our fringe is 43%. So you've got a huge pension liability, huge healthcare liability that you're not, that's state mandated, that you're not moving away. The other question I had is, you mentioned benefit reductions with the unions. How are you going to do that when that's state mandated?
Benefit reductions are state mandated?
You said you were going to, that's, as I understand it, that's
Well,
correct.
health insurance is not.
Well, not health insurance, clearly, but the pension program, are you going
Pension
there?
programs you can't
So
touch.
you're not
You're right.
going there.
Not going to touch that
Okay.
one. But you have other things like certain payouts when somebody retires. That could be a significant amount.
Okay.
There are other things we need to look at too. We need to look at substitute costs and how we can adjust that. Our substitute costs on an annual basis, instructionally, are about $200,000 a year. That's significant. So I think we need to look at those things. But those are not things you can reflect in a budget document. That's got to be a management, supervisory, and cooperative effort sort of thing.
Oh, I agree completely.
We're also talking about healthcare benefits and negotiating that too. So,
Well, I think you have to open up everything now. Looking at this, I mean,
I didn't know if Dr. Zephyr answered that.
this community can't support a 7% increase. There's no way. And there's no additional commercial revenue coming into Jordan Elbridge anytime soon to offset this, so.
Dr. Zephyr?
There will be additional meetings. We meet again on April 6th. It was originally our plan to have a budget before the Board of Education to adopt on April 6th. I don't see that happening. We have to adopt the budget by April 13th. We have to do that. So we will be talking as a board to see if we can do that on April 13th. If we're not going to do it on April 13th, we're going to do it before then. So we have to do that. You will get your annual budget newsletter. I'm sorry.
Kathy?
Yeah, regarding the class size for grade 5,
Yes.
the issue is going to be grade 4 and 5 at Mansfield Elementary. When my son was in 3rd grade, he had a class size of 25, and teachers could not physically maneuver around the classroom because there was only 6 inches of space between the desks. So to adequately reach the children.
Well, over the years, the battles have raged about class size and its effect on student learning. And it depends upon what you want to read. You can read a lot. And you can find that the results come in both sides. Certainly, in wide ranges of the spectrum, it makes a big difference. But frankly, if you have 25 students in a class and you lecture to them, or you have 15 students in a class and you lecture to them, it may make no difference, depending upon the dynamics of the classroom. So really, it's instructional techniques. It has a lot to do with individualization of instruction. Beyond a certain limit, you can't do that. And certainly, do I want to see 27.5 average kids in a 5th grade classroom? No. So that means your options in a small school district, these numbers, they spike in small school districts because if you have 4 sections versus 5, it makes a big difference. If you have 10 sections versus 12, it may not make much difference. So do we need to continue to look at that? Yes, but right now, I mean, if we were to sit down and review, and the reason I'm not providing additional information in terms of where are these cuts, what are we going to do at the high school level in terms of class size? Well, we're looking at setting a minimum class size of 15. And I've said this here before, and I'll say it again. That doesn't mean you never run a class that's lower than 15. It means you set that as a target, and you don't regularly ignore the target. So one of the things we have now, we have class sizes of 4 and 5, 8, 9. And there's nothing wrong with that if you can afford it. But if you can't afford it, you offer those courses every other year or every other semester, and you squeeze those students together. It may be necessary to reduce our elective offerings in English from 10 to 5. And then rotate them through the schedule. So we're looking at those sorts of things. I can't get more specific at the high school level yet because a schedule hasn't been built. And it's sometimes very easy to put things on paper and say you average the number of students by the number of teachers and you get an average class size, but until you can build the schedule, it may not work. And I got to get real close because I can't hear in this environment. So.
Are we going to set a maximum class size?
Have we set a maximum? I can in my own mind, but no, there is no maximum set. There are no class size. I have not been able to find any policy. There's nothing in contract. So in that respect, there's not a limit either way.
We could go over 30 in the high schools.
Would I want to? No. That would be beyond my limit. I'll tell you what my limit is as a teacher, 28. And that's pushing. That's my limit. But I think it's different for different teachers in different situations. You know, if you're teaching a lab-oriented course or you're teaching a technology course with power equipment and all that sort of stuff, no, you don't go 25 kids. You can't. But there is no established maximums. There are no established minimums because, and I've said this before, if you're going to offer 3 or 4 or 5 years of a foreign language, you don't tell students when they sign up as 8th graders or freshmen, you're going to be able to get 4 or 5 years in a language and wait until they get to be juniors and seniors and say, we're not doing that. You meet your commitment and you follow them out. You phase it out maybe, but you don't do that immediately. So we're restricted somewhat there as well. I threw this slide in even though it's probably of no value, but I think it has a long-term value. Any of us who have worked in education for a long time knows that the state aid formulas and the state aid distribution of money didn't break in the last 2 years. It's been broken all along. We've complained about it to our legislators till we're blue in the face, and there have not been significant changes. The major problem is that there's not an equitable distribution of state aid monies. If you're in a wealthy suburban area and only 10% of your school funding comes from state aid, it makes very little difference to you what they do with state aid money. But when you're a district that gets 50% of your support in state aid, it makes a gigantic difference. If we had a 50-50 split, purely tax levy, state aid, 50-50, and our budget went up 2%, and the state revenues stayed flat, you'd pay a 4% increase. So you double whatever the increase in your budget is. Many school districts that are wealthy are not concerned at all about this. If you had a lot of wealth behind your pupils, you wouldn't have this same kind of a problem. Doesn't mean everybody doesn't have a problem. Doesn't mean that our neighbors who are spending their reserves don't have a problem. It simply means that their problem isn't as severe as ours is at this point. Questions?
I wonder if you could speak about what the budget would look like under contingency budget in terms of the tax levy and what the amount would be, and also what programs would definitely be eliminated under that scenario, just so we could have a comparison.
Based upon these numbers?
So if we didn't pass this budget and we go under contingency, what does that look like? Is it better or is it worse? You know, people should know that as well.
One of the things I think we need to address is well, what happens if a budget at 7.3% is put up and it fails? The district has two options if a budget fails. The board can get back together, review that, and decide what they want to do. They can put the budget back up for a vote, or they can adopt a contingent budget. If you adopt a contingent budget, essentially what you're going to be looking at is a 1.92% increase over the current budget. And because we don't have a lot of money, we don't have virtually any money in equipment, there's not a lot of difference that we've got to sort out in that process. Well, we said this one was an increase of 4.7?
4.7.
So if you're going to reduce it roughly 3%, you're going to need to take out another 3 times 107, 110, you're going to have to take out another $330,000. $330,000 would be the equivalent of, roughly, 5 teachers or 5 staff members, depending whether teachers or others, or it could be the remainder of your athletic budget. Where else can you go? I don't think you can reduce your administrative staff further. You need a director of special ed. You have to have a superintendent, whether you like the superintendent or not. The superintendent. I think, my experience is you've got, building principals are key to instruction. They are key. There's research that shows that. Could you share a building principal? Yes. Could you share a building principal in a district this size effectively? In my opinion, no. So I don't think you can reduce anything there.
Who decides in the contingency budget what is cut? Is that dictated by law? What gets cut if the contingency is put in place?
Well, it is, but it wouldn't affect us. You can't buy equipment, for example.
Okay, so equipment's out of it, so the rest of that money is decided by...
But essentially, I don't think we would be hampered by it. It's not like, well, no, you can't have sports or whatever. It's not like that. But it used to be, years ago. But it's not that way anymore. So in any event, where do you go with this? I don't know where you go with this, because I told, we administrators met yesterday morning to go over this, and again, after we saw where this debt service issue left us, and said, we've got to cut deeper. I basically told the administrators, I'm locked in a room and you can't get out until you give me $540,000 worth of cuts. We couldn't get there. I did let them out. They're not still there. So in any event, that's what we tried to do, but we got to the point where we said, where do we go from here?
You've mentioned athletics a few times, but you said the current budget for athletics was $500,000. Is that what you said?
That's what it was, the current years.
Yeah. So you're projecting to reduce it $134,000, which it is what it is. But band, that's another co-curricular. activity for our students. What is the current budget this year? And it is only...
Current budget this year is about 59,000
Okay, so it is
for
significant.
marching band, drumline, and color guard.
Okay, so
And this
it's
is one of those areas where I had some difficulty when we met as a budget development committee, because there was some thought about eliminating color guard and drumline and keeping the rest funded to the extent it would be. But it's budgeted differently in different places, and what I look at is, I'm not sure what each one costs us. If I look at one printout I get in terms of what's budgeted and what's expended, it looks like, if I remember right, the marching band was funded to the tune of $39,000, $38,000, $35,000, somewhere in that range. The other two were around $19,000 for one, and I want to say about $15,000 or $16,000 for the other one. But it looks like those three groups kind of exchange money. You know, something gets funded here, and not enough it gets pulled over to here, or whatever. So I'm not really sure what it costs to run each of those programs separately, or if that's even the way to go. But we looked at a cut.
Well, I was just looking at the equity of reduction, and you just answered my question. Thank you.
All right. If we talk worst case scenario, let's assume we throw it out there and it's a 7% tax levy increase. What's the number for our population in our Jordan Elbridge School District? Is there a way to, what's the number that per household average that would cost us?
I was told that the tax levy is somewhere around $30 per thousand. That's what I was told.
$30 per thousand?
Yeah.
Based on $100,000 value home.
Now, it will vary by town. All right, I mean, I really don't know what your equalization rates are and all that sort of thing, and to what extent you're 100% valued. You know, some districts are that way. They say, well, my house is assessed at $200,000.
Right.
That's what its true value is. So you really always want to look at, your assessed value, assessment on true, if you can. Make sure you're getting an assessment on true. Then you can compare them favorably. So if you were looking at a 10% increase, and if everybody is taxed equitably, then you would be looking at a $3 per thousand increase. The problem is that people forget they may be reassessed, they may put an addition on their home. Lots of things happen that affect what you pay in taxes.
Per thousand of assessment.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect your cost per thousand, but obviously with your total assessment, if your assessment changes,
right,
taxes obviously change. So if you wanted to figure it out, you could use as a rough estimate. So you say, well, I got a $100,000 house, and if it goes up $3 per thousand, it's going to cost me $300 more next year.
See, I think that's what I think would help make people understand really the impact. If we go worst case scenario, it's going to cost me $300 next year. Well, you know, we're all at different income levels. We're all at different ideas on what, you know, we can pay. To me, $300 isn't a big deal to have my kids still take advantage of as much as we can give them. You know what I'm saying? But obviously that changes, and it makes a huge difference. I mean, the unemployment's up there. You know, it's rocking, and it's difficult times. But is the contingency the way to go too? You know.
When we get to the point, usually in my experience, I would give the public that information when we put out the budget brochure. That's when I'd make sure I had all my figures right in terms of what's the tax rate on true, how does it vary from township to township if it's different, and then therefore what can we predict this will mean. Because if you realize it, when the public goes out to vote, they're not voting on a tax levy, they're voting on the amount of money that the district can legally raise to support the schools. The rates and the amount per individual could be very different.
I have a few questions for you. When will we see the line item budget of proposed versus this year? In the past years at this meeting, we've had that breakdown of what is proposed and what was previous years for every item.
It's my understanding that you didn't have that for this meeting, You would have it, obviously you would have it for public hearing, all right? And we will begin to put that together. When we can discuss where we want this to be, I mean, we've only been able to pull this together very recently. And of course, it also depends upon what you consider to be a line item budget.
Well, similar to something Marcellus have, I have a copy of it here. They have, 30 different category items.
Yes,
Percentage of increase for every item.
I have a copy of that very thing here. And if this is what you mean, you would get that shortly. I hope, if we can get agreement. Not if that's the wrong one.
I have it right here.
You got it?
DOE, central office, finance, staff, maintenance, central services, special items, administrative,
that's-
teaching.
The district puts that out and mails that home to all the community members. That has to be prepared by April 13th, I think, if I remember. Maybe it's earlier than that. So we can get it out to print and back. So that's approximately when that will be available.
Prior to tonight's meeting, had the board, I see a lot of them are here, had they reviewed your presentation tonight?
Line item stuff?
Or is this just what you presented tonight? Have they seen it before tonight?
No, they have not.
Okay.
We have a budget development committee that has 4 board members on it, and they have been privy to the discussions. And Mrs. Drake is on the committee, Mr. Richardson is on the committee, Mrs. O'Brien is on the committee, and Mrs. Foote is on that committee.
You talked about reserves using 1.7 million projected for next year. You said something about $1 million of it carrying over from this year. Is that money we did not spend in this year's budget?
Well, here's where I get a little concerned. That was before I discovered $405,000 this afternoon that we're liable for from this year's budget. Now we have to, as we get closer and closer to the end of the year, we can zero in on what will that number be. I mean, I was chastised at the previous meeting because people say to me, we voted on a budget. When we voted on that budget, we voted on this field trip, or this activity, or this course, or whatever. Well, he didn't, really. They voted on authorizing the Board of Education to levy a tax in the following amount. All right? What I tried to do was I tried to say, let's only spend the money from now till the end of the year that's essential. And there's always pushback on that because people have expectations. Up until very recently, I think there are a lot of people, maybe the governor included, who doesn't see this as being a terrible problem. Because there's waste and fraud. And he throws those terms out. Well, I'm sure there's no waste and fraud in government, so we don't need to worry about that. But in the schools there apparently is. And that torques me a little bit, because we can't just pull it out of reserves. There's not that kind of money there. And if there is, when you don't have that money, I don't know what you're going to do next year. It's wonderful if I could say, well, we as a district have a need for a gap elimination adjustment. The state got rid of theirs by passing it along to the schools and other municipalities. Who are we supposed to pass it on to?
7%.
What?
It falls down to the taxpayer. Now they have a gap.
I have a couple more questions. What is our fund balance? Obviously, you came up with a figure today. After that figure today, not including the 405, what is left in that fund reserve balance?
I would say we've got a serious concern for anything over probably $500,000 or $600,000. If you said to me, can I guarantee that we will have $1 million left over to put into that $1.7 million figure? Not yet, I can't.
I know from this year, but you also have money in a fund reserve. It's like a savings account,
That
right?
money, yes.
What is the balance of that account today?
Well, if you're talking about the debt service reserve.
Not debt service. Don't we have a fund reserve, or that fund reserve is just a carryover from year to year? I guess I'm...
It's
over $1 million right now.
Over $1 million? Over $1 million in that one.
Okay.
The debt service reserve only has $600,000. Well, probably about $690,000 left in it.
So if we were to carry $1 million over from this year, and you're using another $700,000 of the fund that's in there now, you're projecting you'll only have a few $100,000 left.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question was, there's teachers, there's cuts, teachers and other people that are projected to be cut. Have they been notified that they're
No, they will be notified early tomorrow afternoon.
I heard different rumors out in the public that
I've heard
they were
different
supposed to
rumors,
know
too.
on Monday, they were supposed to know today. Individuals are coming to work with the idea that they're supposed to
Let
find
me-
out if they have a job or not, and they're not.
Let me explain that. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did, part of that's from things probably that I said at the last meeting. One of the things that I want to make sure that we did was that we certainly informed all of the people who are facing layoffs before something like this happened, and they got informed in other ways. I think that there are probably a lot of people who know that they are in danger, and they want to know for sure. I wanted to make sure we refined that list as well as we could. I'm trying to avoid going out with a list and informing people and then coming back with a second layer of cuts. I really don't want to do that if I can help it. I may not have any choice, but I don't want to do that. We also wanted to put together a packet of information to people that we could share with them when they were notified, that talks to them about the things that they need to do or should do if they're laid off. Applying for unemployment benefits, you know, the COBRA provisions of the school district, retirement possibilities, because obviously these are dedicated employees. They've been with our school district. They've been significant in our community. And it's a terribly emotional and traumatic time for people. You're not just talking about a job. You're talking their livelihood, their careers. You're talking about their homes and their mortgages and their kids and all of that sort of stuff. And this is not an easy thing to do. Think of the effects on your community when people are pulled out of the community because there's no more employment there. I mean, this has an ongoing effect. Yes, if you have waste, you should cut it.
I've got one more item that I wanted to talk about, and it has to do with the cuts in the modified sports. And I think this is more geared towards the board members that are here, because my understanding of the process is superintendent presents his budget to you for review, and it's your responsibility and job to approve that budget and put it out to the public. Hearing through the grapevine that modified sports was on the chopping block, I did some quick calculations today of the number of students that participate in modified sports in our school district. We offer 17 sports today. Approximately, based on my calculations, 268 kids participate on those teams. We have 219 kids in 7th and 8th grade. We average anywhere from 75 to 100 kids per season participating in modified sports. Anywhere from 40 to 50% of the population every season is participating in an athletic team activity. If you take into account that some kids only play one sport, there's many multi-sport athletes, that number probably goes to 50 to 60% of our 7th and 8th graders participate in at least one sport. By cutting those sports out, what is going to happen to those students, their athletic development? Athletics is important. There's a big buzz in our community today that we're not competitive at our JV and varsity level sports. What are you going to do when you have 2 years of development that doesn't happen? I hear we're going to push it onto the rec program. Well, you can't push it onto the rec program, because if other schools don't eliminate their modified sports, we're going to have nobody to play. Modified kids, when they're out there practicing with their coaches, they have approximately 8 weeks of participation, 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. That's 80 hours per season they're practicing their sport and participating in athletic activities. The other thing is I've coached a lot of the rec sports. I have a son that is in 8th grade, I have one in 6th grade, and one in 2nd grade. When my son got to play his first modified sport, there was kids that came out of the woodwork I had never known were in the district that played the sport. I would bet 25% of your kids that participate in the modified level school sports never participate in a rec sport, either because they don't have the parental support or they don't have the financial support. So you cannot push the modified sports back to the private rec programs. You will not get the participation. You will get kids in 9th grade where you will have 10 kids showing up for your football team per grade, and you will not have enough kids to play sports. honestly, as a taxpayer, as a parent, I find the elimination of the modified sports totally unacceptable. Something has to be done to reinstate that to the budget. That needs to be provided. If there's other ways to cut, reductions in those, you cannot eliminate them completely. And I also recommend that you have more public meetings for the public to provide you comment on the information that's provided tonight. There's a great crowd here tonight, but as this information gets around to the people in the community and they hear what is being cut, you're going to have an uproar. The kids are going to come into school tomorrow. They're going to hear there's no more modified sports. Parents and other people are going to be uninformed as to what's going on. Rumors are going to run rampant, and it's not going to be a pretty scene around here. I really believe that you need to have more public meetings. I was on Marcellus' website, as I said. They have 3 scheduled meetings for the presentation of the public, their information to the public on the budget. So people that couldn't make it on one night can make it on another. Questions you think of tomorrow, you can ask on Thursday, etc., etc. You have the time. Please consider that.
Maybe I can make one comment. First of all, I know I can speak for myself. I know I can speak for the Board of Education. No one wants to make these cuts. No one wants to.
I understand that.
But what we have to understand is there's a realization here that we have a lack of funding. So if we take $80,000 from that we took out for modified sports and we put it back in, we have to take the $80,000 away from something. And if you have a suggestion as to where that might be, then I think please give it to us. A good idea doesn't care who has it.
Once you eliminate a whole level of extracurricular activities like that, it will be almost impossible without your bright, fuzzy picture down the road, as you said earlier. It's going to be impossible to reinstate those sports.
Agreed.
So to me, you cannot eliminate something completely. Other cuts have to be made to reduce other areas to make up that difference. I mean, if we have to reduce the modified budget by $20,000, we'll reduce it and make up the rest somewhere else. But once you eliminate it, it's done. And I can tell you, extracurricular activities are important to a lot of people. You take those out of this district, and home values are going to plummet, and people are going to move, and nobody's going to want to live here. Who in the right mind would bring a kid to this district knowing you're not going to have any extracurricular activities in 7th and 8th grade? And as far as I know, I've not heard of any other districts that are cutting complete levels of sports.
I don't know of any either, but I know it has been discussed because early on in the process, Skinny Atlas was talking about cutting all modified sports. They didn't do it, but they were
And you know what? A lot of other districts have also released already what positions are being cut, what programs. We don't have any of that information tonight either.
The saddest thing is that eventually, the way things are going, you're going to see those programs cut in schools around the state because the funding isn't there. I mean, if we're looking at $1.8 million in state aid funding, other minimal reductions in funding, and a $942,000 debt service gap, I mean, it gets tough. And I don't know, I agree with you, put $20,000 back, but then decide, or put $60,000 back, take $20,000 out, but then you still got to decide where the other $60,000 is coming from.
I know you can't discuss this, but here's a suggestion. You asked for suggestions to save money. Do not pay for the appeal for Anthony Scrow and Zahner. That would save $7,500. You're asking what for ideas, but some of it.
Let's analyze that a little bit. Say again what you said. Do what?
Stop the appeal.
Stop the appeal process for the 2 court cases that you voted for the Board of Education.
First of all, for one of those individuals, you will save nothing because the person's getting paid, the person will get paid. So there's nothing saved yet.
No legal
All right,
fees.
now
Oh, you don't have any legal fees.
Now, you may be getting a valuable service for that money to spend, and you can argue that piece, but you're not going to have more money to spend. All right? For the other one, what you're saving is, you would be saving about $72,000 for the person that slides in to replace that person. So for 2 people, you would save $72,000
So there's your
there.
modified sports.
All right? We'd save $72,000 there, almost enough to fund modified sports.
Exactly.
All right? But
Common sense.
we talked about this before.
No, there's no
We
point.
talked about the whole issue of the legal issues before. most of your legal fees, the vast majority of your legal fees to date are not based upon any charges that have been pressed. They are, most of your legal fees are a result of the school district being sued, myself included. All right? So, fortunately, it's the first time I've been sued, and hopefully it'll be the last. But you have certain things that are in existence that you just don't turn around. I don't know. Let's suppose we did that. Let's suppose we reinstated 2 individuals. What is the guarantee that you would have that the district wouldn't be sued by those 2 individuals?
I think regardless, they're going to sue.
I'm sorry?
I think regardless, whether we win or lose, they're going to sue our district, which are our tax dollars.
But when something becomes legal, I mean, maybe I'm not a big fan of the legal profession personally. However, it usually has to run its course.
So here's my question. If it's running its course, has an arbitrator met with the 2 individuals that have been suspended?
I can't discuss
I know
it.
you can't, but I wish that we had more answers. And I think if we
I
had
wish
more
we did
answers
too.
as a public, there would be less lawsuits and
One of
less
the things
foils.
that I find is the most difficult thing for me to be in the position that I am in is to try to answer questions with transparency when I am regularly told that that information can be considered defamatory or can be considered something that I can be sued for, which I already have been. I've been accused in public session of violating confidentiality laws. And I received 6 letters from people who met with me when I supposedly did that and have testified, quote, on my behalf that that wasn't true. But it doesn't matter because I'm the person that will take those shots. And that's the job.
It is.
So, but if I can't give you what I consider to be the truth for fear of the district being sued again, then I will not do that. I can't afford to come in here and me be the cause of more costs for this district because of my behavior.
Yeah,
So-
But you can't get upset at the public or community members for wanting answers because these are our tax dollars and these are our children that are going to be
And I don't,
affected by all these costs. So I think there's a lot of emotion, but I think it's rightfully so. And it's not yours.
I can understand it. Believe me, I've been pretty emotional about some of this stuff too. I wasn't looking forward tonight with great hopes of being welcomed into your arms and saying, well, the Savior is here. It doesn't work that way. So I mean, this is the most difficult budget I've ever worked on. But I've been fortunate. I'm sure last year's budget that had to be worked on here wasn't a lot easier. Maybe a little bit because there was a little bit more room to cut and then leave some for later.
We asked for it.
There's none. I can't find a place. I can't find a place to find $80,000.
When you're missing $400,000 out of last year's budget, I guess that would be easier. I mean, somebody made a mistake, obviously. Don't know who it is, but I suspect I know who it was on last year's budget, that $400,000 you were talking about. Am I correct? That's 4 years modifying the board. That somebody made a mistake that has to be put back into the district. Maybe you can't talk about it, but that sounds like it's back to me.
I certainly won't talk about it.
Right.
You know, mistakes happen. I mean, people are human.
$400,000?
Well, and I think one of the things that you've heard throughout these last 6 months is the board has taken action to correct some of these things. At least that's my anticipation of what's going on. The public needs to put its faith in the leaders that have been elected here to let this thing run its course instead of keep needling it so the community can heal. And that's the biggest problem here. You know, you're focusing on legal fees, which amount incrementally to $90,000 in increase in legal fees. It went from 60 to 150. Incrementally, that's $90,000 on a budget of $27.5 million. That is nothing, folks. It really isn't. Now you can say it's modified sports. Yes, it is. The question becomes though, You know, you can't turn back the clock. It is what it is.
No, we can't.
The money's
We can pull
committed.
battery out, stop it.
Well, I don't think you can, sir. I really don't think you can. And that's the unfortunate thing. I tend to agree. I don't want to see modified sports. But is there another teacher that wants to stand up and lose their job for that modified sports? Because that's what's going to have to happen.
Can I ask a question? The timing of the potential wage increases, is that something that you're going to know definitively, the results of that?
Timing of what I'm saying?
Of the potential wage increases or reduction in the increases, salary increases? Is that something you'll know in advance of the budget approval?
The conversation, first of all, we've been discussing the commencement of negotiations with the teachers union for a while. I meet with the members on a fairly regular basis. I think, though, that one of the things that happens is when you're an interim, they'll test you a little bit and try to see what you like. And then if they don't like what they see, they will take our chances and we'll wait for the next person to come on. So that happens to me sometimes. I don't think anybody wants to feel like the school district is balancing its revenue expenditures on their backs. So in my experience, typically there have been unions that have done that. Not to the extent that they are doing it around our area now, because people are realizing that this is a real problem. And so if we can save 5 teachers by taking a wage freeze, is that something we should do? That's for the union leadership and its membership to decide. I do think that probably there are some of our units that if everybody was going to do it, they would do it. But I think some people are going to say, wait, why should I bear the brunt of it when others aren't?
Have you taken retirement into consideration on this? I mean, is there...
Retirement is not a big package in this particular issue. Of the people we're talking about, we have a few that could retire and that we'll give counseling information to, because it certainly makes more sense if you can afford to retire and want to retire to do that than to go on unemployment. But there isn't a large number of people who have demonstrated a desire to retire. No people came forward, I forget the exact date, February 15th, I believe it is, that they have to notify me if they want to take advantage of the retirement incentive. There were no takers. So therefore, why would somebody want to do that now? They probably don't want to. And of course, when you're talking about a difference with maybe an average teacher's salary is going to be probably around just under $60,000 a year, give or take. A top teacher's salary is going to be around $80,000. If we could have retirees that were ready to retire and then could have some sort of balance, maybe you could save 3 teachers for 2. So we look for that, but we're not in a position to say to people, you need to retire. That's a personal decision, and we can try to keep our fingers crossed we might get some, but I don't see any coming forward.
Dr. Zapper, I'm wondering about the high school SUPA and AP courses. Specifically, we know that in the country we're lagging behind other countries, developed nations with our math and science. We've got a number of students. This 9th grade class, I think, is super. Who are trying to accelerate faster. What's going to happen with our math and science in the advanced courses?
We would not eliminate them completely. What I'm looking at is, do we need to have so much duplication? Do we need a SUPA course that's a duplication of an AP course? Now, they may not be identical, but we need to see where we're getting the most for our dollars. I mean, I've worked in school districts where they had a dual credit program where the students actually went to the college for half a day. And then you weren't paying for the teacher.
But that's busing.
They were paying for the teacher. So sometimes you can do that sort of thing and save money. We have no plan on eliminating them all. But we will look at them selectively to see which ones are enrolled. We're looking at AP courses to see what are the test results at the end. How many of our students take the AP exam and get 3s or better? Now, the score on the exam isn't the only reason you take the course. I understand that. But if we don't have good results, we need to take a look at that. and say, are we doing as well as other schools with similar demographics? We should be looking at those things on a regular basis. You know, they've talked for a long time, educators do not look at, you know, where the bang for their buck is. Where's the value added in education? And of course, and I was told a long time ago, the reason that it's so difficult being in this business is because you deal with the two things that people value most: their children and their money. And this is what we're talking about tonight. How do you deal with this when you say, I don't want modified sports cut, I don't want AP courses cut, I don't want marching band cut, you know, and we can go on and on, and the board feels the same way. But we've got to come up with a bottom line that will meet what you people will support. If you said to us collectively, put up to 7.3%, we'll work hard to get that, because we know what's going to happen if you have to come back with a 1.92%. Because you start to think about that, I don't know where we would cut next. I do not know.
I have two questions, but if you're cutting stage advisors, you're going to have to pay them hourly then. Would you be aware of that? The shows, you said the show was great, you complimented the show.
Best show I have seen at the high school level.
So, but cutting, thank you, but cutting the stage advisor means that you're going to be cutting our technical crew, which means that the hours aren't going to be, because you're going to be paying them hourly.
One of the things we have to start to look at is other ways to do business. Many schools put on these activities without paying $10,000 to stage advisors.
Volunteering.
All right?
There's not going to be I mean, the thing is that...
Because there are volunteers, there are student stage groups.
Which there
I've
is.
appeared in musical performances. Believe me, I'm no good, but I've appeared in a few. And I will tell you that there are other ways to do that. I mean, I'm not saying we wouldn't have to pay anybody ever, but in many school districts, it's the custodial crew that does that, or people from the technology department that do that. They have clubs, they train students to do that. Students learn a lot in the process. They learn about stage lighting. We have students who do stage makeup.
Right. We have that.
Right. And
but you still need a teacher or an advisor over.
And we're still not talking about eliminating producers and directors and choreographers and pit orchestra leaders and all of those other things. And I've explained this before. I don't know the exact number, but for marching band, for drum line, and for color guard, there were somewhere like 27 different positions. Now, maybe they're necessary, all 27 of them. But none of those are mandated by budget. They've developed over time. And when you've got good times, fund them. When you don't have good times, you've got to tighten your belt and say, how can we still make this happen? Are there people out there who will volunteer their time to do this? If it's truly valued by the community, then we should have community groups that could perhaps pick up the slack. If it's not valued and people will not put the time in, nor the money in, it's not going to keep falling on the school district. The school district can no longer afford to be womb to tomb. We can't do everything for everybody. So we try to select those things that reach the most people, have the greatest impact on them, and we try to provide that. But your involvement in an activity and somebody else's involvement in an activity will be very different in terms of how it affects their lives. Cripes, I mean, a mean, miserable person like me can almost be brought to tears by some of the stories that I heard. And that's wonderful that people have those experiences. We don't want to stop that. But somebody has to come forward and say, I got an idea for you. Why don't you cut this? And then we'll know. And we're always guessing because we always have to try to figure out where most of you are.
I see you have some advisors as far as like the photo, the stage, the extracurricular. What about the other ones, the other clubs that are in the school district? Are those going to be?
Yeah, they're part of the hit.
Okay, so like, let's say
newspaper advisors.
So they're not listed, so they are also part of the hit.
Believe me, we didn't not look at anything. We looked at everything. And I told you, for the last 2 hours we sat in a room with the administrators, asked them, they're here. We weren't coming up with anything. And I asked for people to volunteer what they would cut. They don't want to volunteer.
Right.
They'd much prefer if they could say, well, the superintendent told us we had to cut this or that. And it's easy for me because I head on off to the east and I don't have to be here. But for people to think that I don't care is not accurate. I care a lot.
Right.
But I don't know how to find, whatever you want to count it as, $2.7 million. That's 10% of your budget. And you're increasing other costs at the same time. Your debt service costs are going to be sky high. And we talked about that. Can we leave it alone for a while? Can we just meet some minimal level and later on? Well, it's pay me now or pay me later. And I'm worried, and my administration is worried, that next year will be worse.
But maybe next year will be better as far as the community goes. We're a hurting community, and we're divided. So for you to say we need to go back and we need to say that we will support that budget, I'd be happy to tell you that. But there's fighting amongst families.
I know.
It's not good. So how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we begin to heal? Because we certainly are a supportive community. We've supported many budgets. But I'm not going to fight with the people I love.
All we can do, and I said this at the last meeting, all we can do is try to concentrate on the thing that matters the most. And that's providing the kids in this community with the education that they need and that they deserve. And put aside our differences for the time being and concentrate on that. And say, what can we provide? The first time I looked at those numbers and I saw a 26.4% increase in the tax levy, I just got this empty feeling inside. I said, how are we going to do this? And that's when we started to really look at these cuts and say, we've got to cut deeper. I don't know where to go from here.
Just wondering, is there, I know the question was asked earlier, but I don't think it was fully explained. Will there be a list of school by school, high school, middle school, right down to the elementary school, of department heads, administration, if there's an associate, assistant to that, in their duties, so that
And what
positions are cut? Obviously, this would have to be after tomorrow, because tomorrow you're going to cut 6.7 positions. After those cuts, is it possible to
Yes. Is that information available?
Well, the only reason I'm
to a
asking,
degree, yes.
And the only reason I'm asking is you want the public to help you come up with monies. I personally have no idea what positions are at some of these schools. I would like to review that to see if maybe we don't need an assistant to an assistant.
I can tell you, theoretically, is it possible? Yes. Practically, is it going to work to everybody's satisfaction? No. Because here's what happens. You take somebody like me and you make me a superintendent of schools. Well, it didn't happen overnight. And so hopefully I have some experience and some knowledge and skill. But to teach everybody all of the various little bits and pieces, because a lot of times people will come up with what appears to be a simple, easy solution. And usually there are so many other things attached to it that you just can't get to that point. Can we explain some of it? Yes. If there was a good way to get all of that information boiled down so people could understand it, yes. Can we give you a list of the teachers, positions, and what's been cut? Yes. Can we give you that? Can we tell you how much we save in dollars by doing that? Yes, we can do that. But it depends upon the level of detail that you want in everything that you deal with.
I just want the person. I just want the person in their title. What it is.
Organizational chart.
You want the position. We don't care what the person's name is, right?
I don't need their name.
You want the position, and you want to know essentially what. Well, I mean, in most cases it would be. If I'm a math teacher at the high school, you know what I do.
But I want administration. I want bus drivers. I want it all. District office. But and also,
do we have that information? Yes. Do we have it in a manner in which I can just give it to you, I don't know. I guess
think that
you
she's
and I would
right.
have
I
to.
think it'll work. I
Wait.
think that will work if you do that. I think if you have a clear picture of what it's going to be and how, then everyone can see how it's going to affect each individual student, then you're going to have a better chance of passing that.
Like last year, it broke down the cuts, and it said that math was going to cut, 2.
Oh, yeah, I
teachers.
can.
So, and that was included in
I
this
have
meeting.
that information now, but I won't release that until all the teachers and other staff members have been notified tomorrow afternoon. That piece is not a problem.
That's correct.
But
So what I would like to do is review what's left after that. And is it legal to put down someone's, what they make a year?
It's online. It's online.
Dr. Decker, I think specifically what we may want to see, not to speak for Patty, is your proposed budget for next year. What are the administration positions going to be? What is the organizational chart projected to look like next year?
The positions for next year, you're going to have a superintendent of schools. You're going to have a combined assistant superintendent for instruction / CSE chair, which is basically special education. All right? You're going to have 3 building principals. You're going to have an associate principal / athletic director at the high school. Would I leave out?
The other assistant
That's what you're going to have, administrative.
We can get that on paper and give that to the public prior to the Board of Education making a document decision.
I always get nervous because I say, can we do that? Yes, we can do that, but it depends upon how many different pieces of that stuff we get, because do you have the staff that can put the clerical time and efforts into doing it? Do you have an existing document that's easy to do? Can you know what my salary is or a building principal's salary is? Yes, you can know what those things are.
You
Some
don't
of
have
it,
a current organizational chart?
I'm sorry?
There's not a current.
I think we do. Not to that level. We do, but not to the level that you would need to make those kind of educational decisions.
I think it would definitely help the public to understand.
Why
And
isn't it
maybe there
updated?
we could see it updated.
But and some of this, we can tell you how many teachers, how many full-time equivalent teachers are there at the high school in each area, but somebody has to pull that all together. Now, if you look at a schedule, for example, when I was looking at staffing at the high school, I got a schedule that lists the teachers period by period and what courses they teach, but it doesn't tell me how many kids are in the class. So now I got to go to a separate document, and I got to open up that document and look at the period numbers, and then tally these kids over from this document to this document. I'm a dinosaur. I like the old days when things were done by hand. I had my master schedule in front of me, and I could read it. Now I got to go to 4 different documents. We're sitting here all day Saturday working on budget documents, and because of the software system we have, when you get into this screen and you want to go to some other screen because you need other information, you got to close this screen and open up another screen. So if there's information on this screen, you got to format it, print it, put it on your desk, and now open the other screen. Well, that's insane. If I want to find out where a line item is and how much money was budgeted, I got to go to 3 different screens. And sometimes even then I can't find it. So it's very tedious, time-costing work. But if you don't do it, you don't get a good feeling for it. So most of the information you want is available. If you can give me an outline of what you're looking for, and other people can do the same, because if I'm going to do this, or have my staff do this, I need to know if we can do it reasonably well in a time-friendly manner. I can't tie people up for hours and hours and days and days. It's like our issue of FOIL requests, Freedom of Information Law requests. In most cases, we can have the information, but if somebody says to me, I want all of your attorney's bills for the last 5 years. Guess how much time it might take to do that, because I have to redact all those bills to take everybody's name out of there that doesn't have a right to be shared with the public. And anybody can bring the district to its knees in a heartbeat if they want to. And I'll tell you what, around here it's been happening pretty well. So much to the fact that we had to put another position in a couple of meetings ago for an account clerk to begin to take this over. Now, where in the heck sense does that make? Why should we be paying an account clerk to get information to people when they already have it? We had an attorney tell us he wanted our redacted bills, and he admitted that he already had an unredacted copy of of the attorney's bills. But we still have to provide them. That makes a lot of sense. That's really saving you a lot of tax dollars. So I can try, but we'll have to see where it goes.
On your non-labor reduction slide, you have percentages there for like reduction of 20% in non-labor and maintenance. How much is that 20%? And there's also a 25% reduction in materials and supplies. What kind of figures are we talking about here?
I'd have to go back and look and see if my notes, do you remember? I don't remember them.
Why do we not have figures? This time in previous years, we had breakdowns of figures of this year and last year, and we have nothing.
We will have that when we produce for you that line item budget.
No, that's when everything's all done and they voted yes.
Well, I'll give you an example. When I go and look at a budget for 1 year, and I look at a budget for another year, and I look to see what codes line up from 1 year to the next, and 2/3 of them don't line up because we change the codes every year, that's pretty darn frustrating. And I didn't create those documents, so I would take the hit for that one. When we have a budget document, and I can show you in living code that you have 2 years and you have only maybe 1/3 of the line items in those two budgets that are the same, how can I produce a document that compares this year to this year? When you can tell me how to do that without spending days, then I can do that.
Okay, why can't you tell me what 20% reduction of the operations and maintenance cost is? Don't we have our buildings and grounds person right there?
Can I provide that? Of course I can. I can get that out of a computer.
Right.
But everything else, you have numbers of how much is going to be saved with the extracurricular activities and the elimination of coaches and everything like that. But when it comes to something like this, you give us percentages.
You know, I suppose this is probably an absurd assumption on my part, but at some point we do have to place some credibility in some of the people, at least, who are doing the job.
Well, maybe they're the ones in question. Can I ask another question too? Did you ask the non-negotiated units about concessions? Meaning administrative people and office personnel?
I haven't approached that house with any of them yet.
But you're putting together a budget, Cassie. They've got to vote on it soon, and you haven't done it yet?
Is there a plan?
It's only voted down.
I'm sorry?
Is there a plan? You're going for the unions, are you going for the non-negotiated groups as well?
I have not yet. Will we discuss that? I'm sure it will be a topic of discussion, yes.
You gotta go across.
The one that's one's gonna do it, everybody would be. That's our hope too.
Question here?
I just want to know, getting back to the modified sports a little bit, I just want to know if there's any discussion about restructuring the teams to a 7, 8, 9 level and then a 10, 12 level. As far as, that way you wouldn't be excluding any kids from the program. And also I'd like to know, when they did discuss, you said the budget was $500,000 for athletics? 500,000? And, 80.
Not counting transportation.
Okay, well, and $80,000 is modified, so I'm assuming the other 420 is JV and varsity?
Pretty much so, yeah.
Okay, it just seems.
I did not deduct anything when I counted the 80,000. I did not include any materials and supplies, that sort of thing. Would those be a cost too? Yeah, what's that amount to? I don't know, maybe it's $10,000 a year. It varies. And I'm still the type of person, when I pick a number out for cuts, I try not to overinflate it because that gets me into trouble. The issue about breaking the modified into 7, 8, 9, and then varsity 10, 11, 12, I discussed that with my colleagues and there was not interest in doing that. And we could do it, but if you don't have anybody to play against, because you can't play a 7, 8 team against a 7, 8, 9 team.
The other districts would have to follow suit.
But not knowing what other schools are doing that for sure.
No, there was.
Well,
Also,
I contacted the other superintendents to find out if there was any interest in that. And I know that Mr. Hamer did when he was the athletic director, checked into that as well. And unless you have a lot of discussion of that early on, it isn't apt to happen. And with school districts who can continue to do it the way they've been doing it, they're going to continue doing it that way until they have to change. Do I think that's coming? I do. Makes sense.
I guess I got one more question as far as the elimination of those modified athletics. Can I ask why they went for more at the modified level and not the other levels?
Because a couple of reasons from my viewpoint. Number one, I have some history as a middle school administrator and a middle school supporter and middle school teacher. And proponents of middle school education do not believe that middle school youngsters are truly junior high kids. They're middle school kids. They have specific social, emotional, academic, maturational needs that are very different from high school kids. And if you talk to most supporters of middle level education, they would strongly support a strong intramural program that causes students to participate pretty much at the 100% level through those middle school grades. And they would stress that it's probably not a good idea to have them involved in interscholastic competitive play. So that's part of it.
What do you think?
And I do think that if you're going to have an opportunity for kids that perhaps can be replaced, it could probably take place there first. The administration is already committed to looking and implementing an intramural program. Those kids need that kind of activity, frankly, from my position, even more than high school kids do. And you really can't go with a 20 to 30%, gifted athlete concept and plug it in. So if you could get 100% intramurals, you'd be far better off, my opinion. So those are some of the discussions we've had. Yes, ma'am?
How do you justify asking some marketing units to take a pay freeze when someone was given a nearly 28% pay increase recently? How do you justify that?
That was an issue that was in the process of negotiation since last June. I was not part of that. I was not part and parcel of that. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have supported it or I would not have supported it. It was an issue that opened up back in June of last year. It's my understanding that for the most part that agreement was negotiated at the district level, and furthermore that with the exception of one or two issues in that contract that had already been, quote, agreed to. Not ratified, but agreed to. When I came here in November, I met with Bill Speck as the district superintendent, and he handed me a sheet, a couple sheets actually, somewhere around 40 some odd tasks that I was supposed to assume, and one of those tasks was to continue to negotiate that contract. And that list of tasks came from Bill Speck and Mrs. Dominic, who had met together prior to her leaving the district. At least that's what I was told. So, how do you justify it? I've heard a number of statements made that, number one, the individual involved is performing more duties than that individual is assigned to. That's one way you could say it. I mean, I think it is an issue where people are very emotional about it. They will either support it or reject it.